Hi,
Mhm.
Maren. I'm so excited to talk to you today. I've really been looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes. Well, I really want to start from kind of the beginning. I want to really begin with like childhood,
Hmm.
maybe beliefs, but not so much, maybe not so much beliefs, but what really lit you up when you were a child? What were you
Oh,
hoping to like be as a child so that we can kind of go through that story and
yeah.
lead into where you are now?
Interesting. I haven't been asked that in a long time, and I haven't thought about that in a really long time. When I was a kid, I was a performer and I was a creative, always had been. I loved singing. I loved not necessarily dancing, but just moving. I
Yeah.
consistently like was playing make believe and dressing. I had a little sister, still have a little sister, but she was like 4.5 years younger than me, and she was my guinea pig. And I would boss her around and make her dress up, and I would write plays for us to star in together. And I was always trying to like make money from it and charge the neighborhood kids 25 cents to come watch it while we performed on our hill. And I loved playing the piano. I was really musical. I wrote a bunch of musicals. When I was 12, actually, I was the beehive in young women's in the church
Yeah.
I grew in. And I wrote a musical and wrote all the music to it for our group of girls. And we
That's
performed
amazing.
it. It was really fun.
Well,
So
and
that
that's so much work to like not just write the show, but like write all the music to it.
yeah, that was
That's a
fun.
huge accomplishment.
Yeah, I had been like gifted software, like writing software for the computer for Christmas or something. And I was really going to work on that with my little electric keyboard down in my room. And it was really fun. So that's
That's
what I wanted to
amazing.
be, like a singer, or I did a lot of like acting and things like that. And then funny how I just kind of phased out of that. The older I got, the more insecure I became. Um and the less practical it seemed to explore anything like that. And I kind of had to choose like between doing musicals and or doing like sports. um, and
Mm.
I ended up running. I did like, because I'm really not into sports. I did cross country and track and hung out with those friends. And then I don't know. And then my life trajectory, I had no idea what I wanted to actually do when I grew up. I knew I was supposed to go to a certain college and I was supposed to get married and raise babies and only get an education if it was so that I could like have something to fall back on in case
Right.
something happened to my providing spouse and I would have to step up and do that. So that was,
Well,
yeah, I
and I
lost
think
all
it's
that,
I
but
think it's so interesting how like as kids we are taught to be multi-passionate. We're taught to be well-rounded. Like try all the
yeah,
things, learn
child.
how to do everything. And then
Mhm.
as soon as you start getting into early adulthood, they're like, "No, you have to pick something. You have to specialize in something. You can't do all of it." And you're like, "But wait a minute, it was all fun. I
Yeah,
I had fun doing the acting and the singing and the writing and the running and I had fun in all of those areas. Why do I have to just be good at one of them? I'm kind of good at all of them. Like why
yeah,
is that a bad thing all of a sudden? Did
yeah.
you experience that?
Oh, absolutely. Because I think for me it was framed like, well, those are just like hobbies, but they're really on the wayside, and we've got to figure out something that will be practical, that you can
Something that'll
make
be
money,
profitable. Yes.
profitable and practical, and that I can do if I stay home and take care of children.
Right. And then it's only worth your time if it's
Yeah.
going to be making you money. And
Yep.
then and then the hobbies, it's like, well, do that on with your extra time,
Yeah.
which doesn't ever exist.
I know, like
Not really a
it.
thing.
You don't have a lot of extra time these days. You do have to be very intentional about what we spend our time on and making sure we only do things that like really bring us true joy. And I've noticed that that changes season to season. And I used to be really hard on myself about that. Like, are you the type of person who's perpetually onto something new? That's who I am. I like get excited about something and I like dive in and I'll kind of like master it to a level that I'm satisfied with. And then I like will get interested in something else and I'll just kind of set that aside and move on. And then sometimes I revert and flip. But
I also do that.
yeah. And I used to be like, why can't I concentrate on one thing, and feeling like I have to pick one thing and like get amazing at it. And now I'm like, oh, nope. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm going to do right now. And it's okay.
Well, and we've been taught our whole lives that that's wrong, that you have to pick something for your whole lifespan. and then be the very best at it,
Yeah.
or keep working at it until you're the very best at it, or it's not worth your time if you're not pursuing that perfection, that end all goal. And it's like we have to reframe it and start realizing that like it's worth doing something just for the fun of it, just because it lights us up
Yeah.
right now in the moment.
Yeah. And I look back at that and I think like I think that's really a product of our parents' generation, that mindset of, because they were raised by people who had grown up like in the depression, like our
Yeah.
past two generations, like they had a really tough tough times they went through, and I think there was like a lot of stability, and or felt like there was a lot of stability, and finding the thing and then sticking with that, and knowing that you had a income coming in and a paycheck, and like roles were just so strict, what was laid out for you. And I think like our parents' generation, it's hard for them to kind of wrap their head around like this new age exploration and all these chains we're breaking, and even like emotionally getting okay with all the feelings we have and being very vulnerable and transparent and raw about who we are and what we struggle with. Like there's still stigma about therapy, there's still stigma about changing jobs. Like there's something about someone who has not had the same job for 20 years thinking like, oh, something might be a little if off with them because they can't stick with one thing and they're always on to something new, and what's wrong with them. Like there is a little, I still feel that from some people, like, ooh, they're not.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's really this, we're switching, paradigms in the world right now from this ideal of we're not, we weren't living for joy, for happiness. We were living for the supposed to, for
Yeah.
the here's, the box you were supposed to fit in, and if you fit in that box and stayed there your whole life, then that you check the box. Like you got your check mark, you did it right. Good job.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're happy or not. You did the thing you were supposed to do.
Supposed to do.
And right, end of the story. And now we're kind of saying, wait a minute, that life was bringing anyone joy. It
Mhm.
kind of sucked. It wasn't
Yeah.
fulfilling. It wasn't, and we're sort of seeing our feelings matter. That
Yeah.
it mattered about how, if we wanted to stay in that box or not. And most of us don't.
Yeah. It's so limiting. And that's what I feel like my childhood was like. It was like lim and that's out of context, not the greatest word, because I had an amazing childhood. I had a
Yeah.
very loving, supportive parents who were like wanted me to experience all these things, and traveled with me and put me in anything I really wanted to, and like they actually were very encouraging that way. But I think I always felt like it was like play, but when I got older, I had to like be figure out what.
Real.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
limit
Right.
and
Get
more
ready for
like,
real life.
yeah, and limiting as in like what are you really capable of, and what
Yeah. Well,
like
and I really want to say here that like it can be both and. And
mm,
we get so stuck in this idea of like, well, wait a minute. How could I have had a quote unquote good childhood and also have these limiting beliefs that I now have to overcome? How can I be struggling now with these things I saw in my childhood and also see that my parents were loving, amazing human beings?
yeah,
Wait a minute, how can they both be true? They can.
yeah.
It can be both and that is a contradiction that we're seeing in ourselves that is really hard to come to terms with, but it's truth.
So true. Yeah, and there's like a real beauty in accepting all that inside yourself too,
Yeah.
and all your feelings and sitting with them. I've had to like get so comfortable letting the thoughts and feelings I have come up, and actually like entertain it for a minute so that I can dive in and figure out why I'm feeling the way I am, rather than like the stuff
Mhm.
down or the avoidance or push it away. Um yeah, it
Absolutely.
just turns into like resentment and unfulfillment, and but I've noticed that like my parents' generation specifically, it's a lot of avoidance, right? A lot of, or like not even knowing how to deal with.
Yeah. Well, and the avoidance was morally correct.
Mm,
That was what you were taught to do. Like anger is wrong, anger is bad, get rid of it.
Mhm.
You're not supposed to feel that way. So shove it away. Like that was what was morally correct, was to literally avoid anything that seemed difficult emotionally. And
Mhm.
now we're going, oh, that's super unhealthy. Let's like feel our feelings
Yeah.
and let it come and, wash through us so that it can be over with and out on the other side so that we can process it and deal with it and do the thing. And then we can be healthier and move through it instead of like compacting it down to come out in an explosion later on.
Yeah. And it can be so uncomfortable, like to sit there and realize, like, okay, so I remember feeling this way when I went through um a faith transition.
Mm-hmm.
And I like had all these conflicting thoughts. Like, I really want my husband to agree with me, but at the same time, I want him to have his own beliefs and opinions.
Yes.
And I want to respect him for that because that's what I'm demanding. But I like could not figure out at the time how to feel both of those because I felt each of them so strongly, even though they were super contradictory. And for a long time, I would like shove the I need him to agree with me one down because it didn't feel right. And I felt a lot of shame around that because I knew like deep down that's not actually what I wanted, but it was what was coming up for me. And so eventually, when I stopped pushing that away, and I remember like being in therapy and sitting there and actually like giving voice to it because I felt so much shame around that thought. But in therapy, it felt safe to be able to say it finally, but it was really hard. And
Yeah.
and there was like a lot of beauty in me confessing it almost, and then like examining how is it making me feel? Why do I feel the need for that? What am I actually thinking about this? It's not actually about my husband. It's about me and my need for validation. And it's about me and my still trying to get someone else's approval. It's about me not being totally secure in where I'm at and what I'm feeling. Like it was actually all about me.
It always is.
It
Isn't it?
always
Isn't
is.
that just the hardest thing to like come to terms with when you're like, dang it, that thing I was mad about that other person for? Like it was all about me
It
in the
was
first
me.
place. Dang
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But I don't know that you can totally get there until you allow yourself to feel all the stuff and be
Yep.
like, no, I'm experiencing these really icky emotions that I know are not
Mm-hmm.
quote right,
Yep.
but I am
Well,
feeling
and
them.
and the shame cannot like handle the secrecy. And that's the whole deal with shame. And when you start like diving into Brene Brown's work, you start going, oh, she's right. Once you start allowing yourself to say these awful things out loud that are like secrets in your brain, you're like, oh, maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was.
Mhm.
Maybe there's other people who feel this way. And as soon as you start getting it out there, the shame part of it starts evaporating. And
Yeah.
that's why, therapy is so great and friendships are so important and like community is
Hmm.
just essential.
So much. Yeah. Um, that when there's like such a huge power in just being aware of it
Yeah.
too. Sometimes like the quote cure or the release of letting go of those icky emotions is just understanding why you felt them in the first place. And it has nothing to do with having to change anyone or anything. It's more just like, oh, this is actually why I'm upset. And now I know. And it does. It's giving voice to it or something and it can move up and out of your body. It doesn't mean that you might not be triggered or feel it occasionally again, but there is
Yeah.
something to be said for the movement of it, of just understanding.
Oh,
So, but it
absolutely.
requires such a hard look at yourself.
Yeah, I firmly believe that like our journey in this life is really about getting to know ourselves better and
Hmm.
better and better and better and better every single day. And it's mostly about becoming aware of why we are doing what we are doing.
Yeah, growth, expansion, love. Like life is so beautiful. It's such a gift, even though we experience all these hard things. But it is, I totally agree with that. It's all about
Yeah.
expanding that part of ourselves.
Well, and we experience these quote unquote hard things because they help us understand ourselves better. And
Mhm.
we experience them as hard because it's a perception.
Yeah.
They don't have to be hard. It's just that we're seeing them through that lens.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Byron Katie's work?
I have her book and I need to read it. I have
Yeah,
like
I know. I've read it.
I have this terrible addiction to buying lots of books and then not being able to read them all.
I do that too. But she has one called Loving What Is, and it's
Yeah.
talking about the right. Okay, is that the one you have?
Yes.
Work. And it's like letting go of the need for how things should be and accepting what they are as right, and then figuring out all the stuff, like it's all a perspective change instead of like regret or thinking it should have happened differently or is supposed to happen a certain way. It's like, but it did happen this way, so obviously that's what it was meant to. What did we learn from it? How did it actually serve you and these people? Can you change your mindset around it? And that has been like really beautiful to something I would definitely suggest everyone to read.
Yeah, I need to read that one. I I totally I feel like I say this all the time, but like our perspective is where our greatest power lies.
That's
That's how
that's a mic
we
drop quote right there.
right? That's
Yep.
where we can change everything about our lives, about what's happening to us or for us,
Mhm.
or, whatever's going on in our world that we're going, I like this or I don't like this. Like it's all inside you to change it. It's all in you. You have the choice to change it. Um, it's I just recorded a mini-sode last night that aired today, so in a little while, when this episode airs, that'll be a little bit old. But there was this study that was done where this it was about how we perceive our the people around us, and it was called the scar experiment. If you've never heard this before, where they put fake makeup scars on these women's faces, and then they showed them a mirror so they could see the scar in their face and how deformed they suddenly looked with this fake makeup
Aw.
scar. And then
Uh-huh.
they took the mirror away, and then they told them they were sealing it in place, but actually they were removing it. And then they sent them out in public. So the women thought that they still had the scar on their face, but they really didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then when they came back, they told all the researchers everyone was staring at the scar on my face.
Ah,
Everyone was treating me rudely. Like, but it wasn't really there because it had been removed without their knowledge.
yeah. Ooh, interesting. All that self-projection.
What's real is what we believe.
Mhm.
It's what we are perceiving. We literally change what we perceive as happening to us by what we think.
Mhm. Yeah, thoughts are the most powerful thing we have. So that's a really cool study. I love that.
Yeah, it was, and it's like it's just the most important thing. And that the work of all these incredible people like Byron Katie and Brene Brown, like it's life changing
Yeah, it
to
is.
learn more about this. So my next question for you was like, how has what you loved doing as a child informed what you're doing now and what lights you up now?
Hmm. I think at the crux of it is that I'm just such a creative. I love to create, and it's not just limited to like music or I love writing books. I love baking. I love throwing big parties. I love like anything where I can like create like an experience around something is huge for me. And like even when I went to college, got married really young. I was like 19 years old, kind of stayed at the school I was at, not really knowing what I wanted to do, but that was the school I was supposed to be at, and that's where my husband was, and we were all about like helping him get his degree and kind of revolved around
Yeah,
um
living in the supposed
gonna
to
do.
phase.
Yeah. And while I was there, I was majored in I wanted to do fashion design. But the college I went to didn't have that option. The closest thing they had to it was oh my gosh. It was a home and family living major.
Okay, so what I don't even think you know this, but that was my design. Okay, we have so much in common, and I don't think you realize. So I majored in home and family living with an emphasis in sewing because they had
That's what
gotten
I did.
rid. I know, because you just
Yeah.
said that. And
Clothing
because
construction.
they
Yeah,
right,
that's what
clothing
I did.
construction
Huh?
and with Donna Ba, which we
Mhm.
might have been in school at the same time with Donna Ba,
Maybe
and
we
because they got rid of the fashion major, and then I double majored in costume design
Oh.
because I
That
wanted
would be
to
good.
actually like do anything.
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to study opera and sing and
Oh,
it didn't get in and whatever, it was a whole story. But then because I didn't get in the music program and I was totally devastated and I was like, this degree program means I didn't get into music and I couldn't.
yeah.
So then I double majored and then that was how I ended up doing both makeup and
Oh,
costume design.
okay.
Well, and I just found out yesterday at my meeting that they are now doing a costume construction class at
Oh,
BYU.
interesting.
And I was like, where was that when I
Mhm.
was
Where
in
was
school?
that?
I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had like the
That's
same
funny.
path and it's amazing and beautiful.
Yeah, but
So
it's kind of small world,
I
huh?
know.
So, and then I had all these dreams of like starting a fashion line because I'm really into bold, giant. I mean, if
Yes.
I had my option,
Gorgeous.
if I had, thank you, if I had my choice, I would wear clothes every single day like I look like I'm walking down a runway. Like really impractical, artistic pieces with giant ruffles and feathers and any like I just love the bold, daring
You
look. And I
know,
loved
I
making.
used to have this, I used to say this, and I don't know that I like said it out loud a lot, but I would say it in my head all the time. I was like, I need more excuses to dress up like on a daily basis. Like I need more reasons to dress up. And when I got this like professor job, I was like overthinking every single moment of it. Like I was like, I need all the button up shirts. And I was shopping like every single day for like the most perfect, like not too eccentric, but kind of glittery, but kind of
Oh,
like bam, like I must look like a professor. No, we're like, hey, I'm like you and me. We're like, we got
yeah.
this. Like the
I know.
fashion.
I was
That's
drawn to you immediately, one, because we live in the same state, but two, because you have
right.
like I'm like, that girl's in glitter. She's
Like
in sequins,
glitter.
like she's speaking my language.
Oh my gosh. I'm like dressing up is my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
And like most of the reason I want to be on stage is performing is so I can dress up as a person who's performing on a
Yeah.
stage. It's not
Yeah.
even about the audience or the singing. It's
Oh,
about the
exactly.
dressing up for the stage.
Totally.
So
I that
anyway,
resonates so much with me. So, side note before I move on, but like I talk to so many women who are when they talk about like where would I ever wear that to when we're talking about shopping or like what they would buy. And I was like, you don't need an excuse to wear it. Like I put on crazy clothes to go shopping at
like
Walmart. Like
at
I
home for my
just
dang
wear
self.
it. Yeah, just
Gonna
wear it.
wear it at home.
Like
Like
I'm
there's a meme with like Beyonce or somebody, and it's like somebody asking her like, "What did you dress up for?" And she was like, "For my dang self." And I'm like, "Yup, that's
yes, I love
exactly
that.
it."
Yes, and that's what it should be. They're like yeah, I
Yes.
every day I actually make a point every day to get dressed in something besides like my leggings or pajamas. I feel so much better about myself and it really does change how my day goes. It's not about even if I don't leave the house, I'm still really good about it. But
Yeah, the same.
is it okay if we pause for just 1 second?
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Anyways, I feel like my motto is perpetually overdressed. And I love that. I love being perpetually overdressed. And it used to
Same.
I used to like be a little conscious of it. And now I'm so used to it that people will make comments to me like, oh, why are you so dressed up? And I look down and I'm like, I'm not. Like I'm
This
actually
is just me.
I'm like,
Sorry.
me being really dressed up would be like pulling out one of my formal dresses. I'm just like in a sundress or it's part of it's probably where I live is a little more conservative and not as flashy, but
Right,
anyways,
LA or New York might be a little
yeah.
different, but
Yeah,
like here it's like okay. But
especially
well,
around
and I always felt really self-conscious of like going to the drop off to drop off my kids at school
mm,
and being like, I'm the only one who's got makeup on and who's not in
yeah.
pajamas. Like I'm like sitting here with my lashes and my earrings and like in real clothes and getting looks. And I'm like,
Ah,
it
but
used to
feeling
make
like
me
the bomb, right? Have
right,
you
like feeling
fit?
like the odd one out
Yeah.
because I had like because I was looking good and it used to make me feel like bad. And it took work. Like there's so much inner work that goes into everything we do in our lives, but like I had to really be like, oh, wait, no, that's not like a bad thing. Like I have to like freaking own like one of the things that Kathy Heller said that really she said it at the summit that authenticity is not just the bad things. It's not just owning like, oh, I had a crappy day. Oh, I feel angry. Oh, I feel like things are bad.
Mm.
it's also owning the amazing parts of ourselves. Like, oh, I feel like a freaking $1,000,000 today. Oh, I feel like a goddess. Oh, I feel like I look gorgeous today. Like, that's also authenticity.
Funny how we're programmed to like be okay with talking about how unhappy we are.
Right.
That's totally fine. But if you start going on and on about how much you love yourself and how beautiful you think you are and how grateful you are for all the good things in your life, people are like, well, she's arrogant. I'm like,
Right. Well, and it's like one of those is so much more healthy and influential in a good way than the other. Like, I grew up with my mom and she still does this and I love her to death, but she still goes on and on about how ugly she is and how terrible she
oh,
looks and how much she hates herself. And I was like, no wonder I like couldn't stand my body my whole life, because it
no.
didn't matter how much she told me that I was pretty or how good I looked, because you don't hear that. You take on what your mom says about herself. And so I was realizing that like I was neutral to my daughter for most like she's 14 now. So I'm like, oh, like she's grown up now. Like what happened? And that just like went overnight. And I was like, tried really hard to just say nothing about my body. And I was like, I think that was the right tactic. And so
Mm,
like this morning I got up and I was like, you're I'm gorgeous and so are you.
yeah.
I was like, I'm beautiful and so are you. And I was like, I need to make more of like a concentrated effort to tell her, like, not just tell her she's beautiful, but to tell her that I think I'm beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because of that, she's beautiful too, because apparently people think she looks like me, which is funny because I never thought she looked like me. But
Well, we take on like subconsciously as children, we do think everyone's beautiful, and especially our mothers, because usually, they're loving and we that even if they're not, we
right.
still want their love. We're still connected and attached to them. And so if we're looking at them and we think you're beautiful, there's nothing wrong with you, but they're telling us all the things that are wrong with them, or we're picking up on their subconscious feelings of insecurity and don't want to show up, and they're too old to wear this, or they're too fat to wear it, or whatever the thing is, then suddenly we're
Mhm.
like, oh, but I didn't think anything was wrong, but I guess there is something wrong. And so then we look at ourselves and think, well, I guess there's something wrong with
Right.
me too then.
Because
And
that's our model of womanhood.
yeah. Yeah, it's really sad. I can even remember like consciously doing that with my mom, who is a smoke show and she's almost 70 years old. And I remember this was all the way back when she was like in her late 30s. And I'd be like, Mom, let's buy you, like, we'd go shopping and I wanted to put her in these cute outfits. And she was always like, oh, I'm just too old to wear something like that. Or it's too, uh,
Flashy. Yeah.
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, you look amazing." I even remember thinking that at age 14. But
Mm-hmm.
anyways, I've kind of diverted a little bit, but
Well, how have you been able to work through some of these, limiting beliefs and other like how have you done some of this deep work to help you come to this, like really loving who you are now? Because I know that's been a huge journey
yeah, it's
for
been a big
you.
journey for me. Um, okay. Well, I feel like I hit my whole 20s, I was really not myself at all. Like I kind of took the opposite route and like tried to be the opposite of actually who I am now. And I was really I wasn't outwardly rude or judgmental to anyone, but in my heart, I very much was. And because I was so uncomfortable with who I wasn't being authentic. And I had all these goofed up ideas about who I was supposed to be, what I was supposed to be. Some of it was tied around religion, but a lot of it was just like my version of worthiness and kind of trying to reach this pinnacle idea of a pious lady. And I very much hooked on to external expressions of that, like what I would wear and what my body looked like and what actions I was doing with my family. Um, and then I had some issues in my first marriage, and that really like wrecked me even more. And then fell madly in love with the husband I'm married to now. While I was still married to that first husband, we met each other. we'd been friends actually for like a few years. We lived in the same neighborhood. And then started music writing together. We were collaborating, doing some music stuff. And suddenly there was this person who could see me for who I was and not what I was on the outside. And there was like a pull and a draw of being seen and accepted for who I actually was on a level that I had never experienced before, like even from my family, and even from myself. Like
Mm.
he was able to like look into my soul and pull the thoughts out of my head when I couldn't articulate them. And the like weird connection and comfort level I had of being able to talk to him like transcended anything I'd ever known in any kind of relationship. Like there were things that I had been keeping about myself, um that I had never like literally had never been able to voice to another soul that had eaten at me for 10 years. So much shame that I felt around certain topics. Um and there was something about him that it was like I didn't even have to try or think about it. It just came out. Um
Well, and
and
I truly believe that like witnessing somebody is the greatest form of love. Like truly
yeah,
seeing someone is just the best way that you can show them that you love them.
yes, and it was like that witnessing that he did of me like woke me up to who I really was and
Mm.
helped me like remember my total divine self. Um and I don't even want to insinuate that like I had to have someone else do it for me, but because it really was all me, because even after I met him it took me years to still like get to who I am today, but there was something, there was like an unlock there that was
Yeah,
kind of
it's like a reflection.
me. Um, and so long story short, we fell madly in love, had like a brief emotional affair, a very limited physical relationship for like seriously like 3 weeks. And then I ended up moving with my family and he stayed in Utah and I moved to Texas. And then a lot of stuff happened. We finally, like I came clean and we talked about what was going on and dealt with all the problems in our marriages, cut contact off forever. And then he ended up going through a divorce and I ended up going through a divorce. And then afterwards we reconnected and then eloped and got married in Vegas. And we've been married for almost, I think, 8 years now. But anyways, but during that time, um, when you go through a divorce, especially in the culture that I was in, where divorce is a big no-no, especially in
Yeah.
my family culture, that's actually where I felt the brunt of it was my family culture.
Well, and
Um,
divorce is hard enough as it
oh,
is
so hard.
without all of the external crap like heaped
Oh,
on you.
yeah.
Divorce is already hard.
Yeah, it was like torturous. But honestly, not as torturous as facing the scandal that I had put myself in because we caused quite the scandal in small town Spanish Fork, Utah. Um, there was like all this culture stuff in the church we were in that it caused a lot of problems with, and then just kind of the, it's a small town and
Yeah.
it was crazy. It was bad. And it was like, take everything that you've ever felt about yourself, all the bad stuff that you've ever thought about yourself, all the insecurities you've had, all the fear, all the shame, all the judgment, and then bear it for everyone to see. And you have no control over what they think about you. You have
Well, and
no
I have,
control or like
yeah,
platform to tell anyone what your quote side of the story is. And you have
right.
to somehow sit in the judgment and like surrender to to the notion that like you are who you are and that's the only person who you can accept and everyone else will do their thing and you're going to have to be okay with it
And
or
it's
you're sunk.
and which is entirely unfair. Like other people can just go bite it because the other people's judgments are ridiculous and unfair because no one ever knows the whole story. And I think perhaps the hardest part from my external perception that knows nothing is that your identity, like your entire identity being called into question and like having to hold so firmly to who you are without all of the supports that you were used to having.
Yeah, That's such a good way to put it. It was my entire identity was wrapped up in who I was supposed to have been, who people thought, quote, I was, who my family wanted me to be, and what the easier path maybe would have been. Certainly if I'd wanted family support or general culture support, or that, all the people I used to know, would have been, well, you just need to repent and stay married to this guy and stay with your family, and then we'll kind of forgive you and forget about this. And I knew deep down that I couldn't do that. It was not what was going to be good for me, for my family, for my kids, for my ex-husband. Like, had nothing to do. I wasn't in contact with Pat, my husband now. I would like, this was all about me. And I had to like really get to the root of what I felt was right for me at like all costs. And I really did. I gave up all my family support. Like I had my one little sister, the one I'd bossed around years growing up, who understood. She had seen enough of what my first relationship had been like to understand like the place I was in and why it was necessary for me to move on from that relationship. But the rest of them, my other siblings and my parents, who now I have a good relationship with, but it was awful.
Time.
Yeah, it was bad. Um, a
Well,
lot
I
of
just,
I lost a lot of friends. I mean, it was bad. I was like, my soul was just totally ravaged.
well, I
But
want to say that like the cost of staying true to yourself might feel like the loss of everything, but
Mhm.
actually the cost of not doing it is losing who
Yes,
you are, which is everything.
yeah, yeah. So that was like my total rock bottom. Reevaluate who I am. Where's my voice? Because I hadn't had it for so long. And then finally, I actually had a church leader in Texas who, I mean, I was brand new to, okay, so I'd like moved on the brink of like
Yep.
all this happening. And I showed up in Texas and I called up this guy, my church leader who I had met like one time, and was like, I was actually very numb. I could barely even speak. I was just like ravaged, right? Like I said, I I've been having an affair and I'm very in love with this guy and I'm not in love with my current husband, but I want to do the right thing and I need help and blah blah blah. And he there was like silence on the line and I could feel like the
But what the crap do I do with
oh,
this? This is really hard.
but
Because they don't really know what
yeah,
to
I know.
do.
It was really crazy. In hindsight, I've since moved on from that faith and I
Which
don't
I'm
know.
like, for the record, that's like what we're taught to do is like
Right.
go to the
Right.
people who don't actually have it.
Right. I have like, so I have to say, like, on a principle base, I don't obviously agree with like having to get external religious
Yeah.
people involved in your personal life.
Mm-hmm.
However, at the time, that's the context I was in, and that's what I needed. And it ended up being amazing for me at that time.
Good.
So,
Good, good.
like,
And I do really believe that like we are led to the things that are going to help us the most in whatever context, like
yes,
whether it's
yeah,
I mean, right, wrong, whatever, like we are led. We're led to where we're supposed to be. We're led to where, the universe, God, whatever you want to believe in, like we are led to the things that are going to lead us in the direction that we're supposed to be going in.
yes, yep. And I was very much led to work with this particular man. And he said something to me on that phone call that night that was like, honestly, like the crux of which direction I went. He was like, he took the pause and then he was like, okay, I I understand. Um, and he gave me a really sweet, very tender religious moment, like, God loves you and we can repent of anything and the atonement will work for everyone. And then I felt very strongly like my voice came through and I was like, hey, I just have to tell you, I'm not in love with my husband. I'm in love with this other man and I can't change that. And he paused again and he was like, okay, well, whatever you decide to do, wherever or whoever you end up with, the atonement works for everyone, and God loves you, and it'll be okay. And what he was basically saying was your worth and like
Mm,
your is not wrapped up in who you're married to or what you decide to do with your family. It's who you are. And let's figure out who you are and what you need to
yes.
do. And that really was like another piece of unlock for me as far as freedom and finding out what I really needed. And then much longer story, but like I worked through a lot of stuff. I went through a lot of therapy and help with me, and I kind of got my soul back together. And a lot of that was in not confessing, that's not the right word. It was in being very transparent and open about my past and to all these new people I was meeting in Texas where I lived, and just being okay with it. And I was fortunate that those people hadn't like they were taking me at value, and they weren't,
Yeah.
if there were judgments, I wasn't aware of them. I was just soaking up the love. Um,
Well, and I think confessing is such an interesting word because it's like we can confess, which is almost it's just like the opposite of shame, right? It's just like putting it out in the open, even if it's just you and yourself saying it out loud in your head. Like even
yeah,
if it's just like admitting it something to yourself, like, oh, this is real. Like that can be so hard for us to just
yeah,
admit to ourselves with like, I'm actually angry or I'm actually like scared or anything. Like it can be such a powerful cathartic thing
it
to
is. It's
do.
so cathartic. Yeah, to be open like that. And so that was kind of like the biggest thing that propelled me into accepting who I was and learning how to use my voice and be very authentic and open about it, because it took me away from worrying about the judgments of others. Um, and it made me much less judgmental of anyone else at the same time. Because suddenly I was like, I used to be one of those people that was like, I would never step out on my spouse. I would never I was really haughty about it in my heart.
Mm,
And then all of a sudden I was one of those people, and I was in so much pain, and I was in so much hopelessness, and like I understood now why people make decisions the way they do,
right. It's always
even
so much
really
more
bad ones.
complicated.
Yeah,
Right. It's so much more complicated
it
than we think
is.
it is. And that is so much like why we have absolutely no right to ever like judge like anybody ever, because it is never like we never know the full story
Never. Yeah.
ever.
And I suddenly felt the need to I wanted to know everyone's story, and I like wanted to I like it opened up a new level of compassion in me, and that compassion was first extended towards myself, and then I was able to do it with others. And so what I've noticed is there's such a huge relationship between how authentic are you and how critical you are of other people.
Oh, yeah.
So the more judgmental and the more critical and the more thoughts I have and opinions about what other people are doing and what I think about it, like that is not actually me being authentic to who I am, because who I am at the core is an expression of source energy. I'm an expression of God. However you want to say it. I'm God's child. I'm
Yeah.
source. I'm divine. I'm the universe. It's whatever. So, and God, universe, source doesn't judge, in my opinion, doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't disapprove.
Absolutely.
To me, there's no such thing as worthiness. There is no worth. It's just we are. The same way all my children have equal worth, quote, in my eyes, because they're mine. And my love is not conditioned upon things they do or what they say or how they think or act. It's just the inherentness of them being a creation of
Yeah.
me.
I love what Kathy Heller says. She says, we are a masterpiece, a piece of
Mhm.
the master. And it's just like, yes, like we just are.
Wow.
And when we inherently just know that, it changes everything. It changes the way that we treat each other. It changes the way that we show up in the world. It is
Because we're
everything.
not judging ourselves for who we are anymore. Suddenly it's like, it's okay. This is who I am. This is what I look like. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is
Yeah,
how
we
I
can
think
stop
about
trying to prove ourselves and stop trying to make other people trying to prove themselves.
it. Yeah. Yeah. So in the meantime, after I got married to my current husband, Pat,
So you walked through fire
I did walk
and
through
you
fire.
came out on the other side
I
stronger
stronger, but
eventually.
it still was only a piece in my journey. At that time, I was still very much outsourcing. I had relied on that male church leader as like kind of my voice of approval, my stamp of approval. I was still outwardly searching for my view of divinity, of needing some authority figure to like guide me and tell me what to do, to say I
Right.
was
Tell me
okay the
who I
way I
am.
was.
Well,
Yeah,
and I think we do that like just like, a parent guides a child and like helps them learn how to walk and helps them learn how to talk and helps them learn how to be a human. Like we kind of go through that same journey as adults when we're trying to learn how to be secure
absolutely.
in our own selves, where it's like, okay, I need somebody to tell me I'm okay and that
Yeah,
everything's going to be okay and that I'm enough. And sometimes we need to hear that over and over and over and
yeah,
over and over again until we really believe it. And it could take a really, really long time.
yeah. And so what happened was I married Pat, and suddenly he was the guy who I needed approval and love and validation and guidance and authority from. He was like, I put him in this role of like the ultimate patriarch, which is so opposite of
Yeah.
I'm like such a feminist. And I made him this guy on the pedestal that I needed all these things from. And he unknowingly was in that role. And that was the dynamic we had. Like, and so like when a few years went by and I started changing a lot of things about me and getting more independent, and kind of I was grappling with some faith issues and really figuring out like what I felt about the universe and what I thought was right for me and what I wanted out of life. It caused a lot of tension between us because it was like I put him in this role and now I was bucking against it and like hating him for playing this role even though I'd made him do it. If that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
I mean, this was all very subconscious. Neither of us were aware that that's what was happening. But and he's a fixer. I would come to him and rant about my issues or unhappinesses, and he was like, I really felt like what you were coming to me with was what we had always done, was here's the problem, please fix it. And so I was just trying to fix it for you. I didn't understand what was really happening, and I was like, I know, it's okay, I didn't understand either. But we had to go through a lot of hardship in our marriage, like a lot of miscommunication, a lot of
Yeah.
misunderstanding, a lot of hurt feelings, and honestly, a lot of like really awful, difficult conversations, because a lot of our marriage, we'd gotten married, wrapped up in all this religious fervor, and suddenly that was not a thing for me anymore. And thank goodness we got married because we truly loved each other, and we he was my person. He was my soulmate. He was the guy who unlocked divinity in me and vice versa. And so we had a very strong foundation, but it was really hard to be misaligned for so long. But I look back now and I'm so grateful for this little inner child in me who, like, I was like bucking at the system, just like flailing, angry and upset and not knowing where I was going to land, and still doing it anyways because I knew in my heart that was what was going to be the path for me, and that everyone around me was going to benefit from me being who I was, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and so I worked through all that. We had a baby in the meantime. Well, we actually spent the first 3.5 years of our marriage apart because I was in Texas and he was in Utah, and our divorce settlements, that's where our kids had to be. And so we were married for like 4 years, and I traveled back and forth every other weekend and like holidays for us
Wow.
to see each other. And that was it. We got like maybe 40 hours together, and then I was back on a plane and out to work. And I was a school teacher. I I had been a stay-at-home mom, and then I got my like alternative teaching license and became an English teacher. And I worked full time in Texas, had my two little girls. Life was really crazy. And all I kept thinking I wanted was to be a stay-at-home mom because I knew we were supposed to have this baby. That's another really long story, but I knew we were supposed to have this baby. And finally we had a baby. Like, right, I got pregnant during COVID, and it was like at the end of when I was going to have to stay in Texas. I was only going to have to be there for 5 years. I was going to be able to take my kids and move. It's a part of our divorce settlement. And I was like so excited to quit my job and be home. Like we'd leveled up our finances so much. We'd worked really hard and gotten in really big into the law of attraction and manifesting and changing our mindset and doing all these things. And my husband's a badass and had really like provided for us enough that I could quit my job. And we bought a house here and we were finally all going to be able to be together and blend our family for good. And then I got here, had that baby, and then I was miserable. I was miserable. I'd gotten all the things I wanted. And then all of a sudden I was like 35 years old and I'm home all day with a newborn. My other kids are all older. They're all off to school. My husband's working. I'm like, I've got nothing to do
It's
except
so funny how we're like, just wait for this moment and then I'll be happy. As soon as this and this and this and this happens, then I can be happy. And you're like, wait, that's sort of the opposite of the way the law of attraction works.
totally. Yeah. I got everything I thought I wanted. I was in the depths of like facing my faith transition, like really owning what I thought about things and then being brave enough to like stand on my own 2 feet about it. Face the culture, face my neighborhood, face my husband, face my family, all the things. I was dealing with intense body shame and postpartum issues.
Yeah.
Like really struggling with that so badly. I remember there would be points where like I couldn't even stand to be naked in front of my husband because I was just so ashamed and like so fearful that he was
Yeah.
not going to want me. I'd had some trauma and some issues in my first marriage that really had messed me up that way. And then finally, I started diving into my spirituality. And it became much less about religion for me and much more about finding truth and love in the everyday and in myself. And so I like did a there was though a point where it was like once I released myself from holding to ideals that I knew I didn't believe in, there was a great unburdening within me. Like I'd gotten to a point where I knew I didn't believe in a certain faith, but I was still scared to live it and show it to others. Fear of judgment,
Yeah.
fear of all the things. Afraid of what it might do to our family because my husband was not in the same place with me and our kids were all over the place with their ideas about stuff. And it was just, I felt very alone. And I remember like in my bathtub doing lots of soaks and meditating and getting into meditation. That was a big key for me. And just being like, I have to do this or I'm going to drown. Like
Yeah.
I,
Meditation's
I'm going to
life
drown.
changing.
I can't do this anymore. I just have to be who I am and I have to be okay doing it alone. And it was like going back to when I went through my scandal, my divorce. I got divorced thinking I was going to be 100% alone the rest of my life. And I was totally okay with that because it was so preferable to staying in the marriage I was in because I was so lonely there. And
So
this
what was
was,
the change point?
um,
Or
it was
was it like a slow, was there like a moment or was it like kind of a becoming?
It was after my baby was born. He's now 3.5. And I was okay, I can actually remember this moment because things were really tense between my husband and I because I was like really struggling with being unhappy in this stay-at-home mom role that I demanded he let me do. And we got in like a really bad fight one day. And I remember at that point being like so sick to my stomach, like, I don't know that I can do this anymore. Um, like this might be the end of us because I can't live this way. And there was something about that possibility that like panicked me so intensely because I loved him so much. And the thought of living without him and being separated from him like voluntarily felt so incongruent with what I wanted and so wrong and so the opposite of what my soul desired that I was like, I've got to figure out a way to make this work because I want him. I want him so bad. And it had nothing to do with our kids. It had nothing to do with like anything. It was really just about him. And I was like, I have to go back to what he saw in me in the first place and why I even love him. And I love him because he sees me for who I am. And that's what he actually wants from me. And so I better show the hell up so I can be loved the way I want to be loved, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really about him. It was still really about me, but he just makes me see all these things.
And the truth is that it really is always kind of about us. And we think
Always
that's
is.
really selfish. And it's like, you know what? It is. And that's okay. Because when we choose, and this sounds so bad, but like when we choose that selfishness, it actually is better for everybody else
So much better.
because it makes it so that we are regulated and we are whole. And when we show up whole, we show up better for everybody else,
So
just
much
like
better.
you're talking about.
Yep. Yeah. So it was kind of like that. I think my baby was like 4 months old at that point, and it was like in April. And I just like, I finally was like, okay, enough of hiding, enough. I'm just going to deal with it. And so it's not like my life changed so drastically. Like I don't live any differently except for the kind of clothing I wear, but that was a big deal for a lot of people. And so I had to face a lot of judgment and criticism over that. But I got to a point where I realized that I liked the triggering, because every time someone would say something rude, I would be like, huh, I don't think that about other people. I think I've evolved a little bit. And then I'd be like, huh, why do they care so much? Huh, do I care what other people wear? Like it was just such a learning experience for me to realize how far I'd come, and feel compassion for them
Mm,
and love for myself, and be like, every time I would get it and I'd be triggered by it, I would be able to consciously recognize this is an opportunity for growth. This is a moment where you really get to look at yourself and ask, why is it bothering me that they think this or say this? What is it I'm actually struggling with? And that once again, once I was aware of why, it wasn't about the other person, it was me feeling judgment about myself and still not accepting myself and letting me be fully free. And the awareness of that would help
yep.
me, it would temper it, right?
All judgment is self-judgment.
It is. It all is. And so then I just got to this point where I was like, I don't want a hobby. I want a job, but I want a job on my terms. And I want to help people love themselves. I want to love myself some more. What's my answer? I went through all this deep spirituality. Meditation has been huge for me. Like if I had to pick one thing that was life
Mm,
changing, that's actually what it was. And
yeah.
it's such a simple concept, so simple, and it
Yes.
has changed everything for me.
Mm,
I've been
I
meditating
totally agree.
consistently. Yes, I've been meditating consistently for like 2 or 3 years now. And I mean, I'm not perfect at it. I don't get it done every day, but almost every day. And that has helped me get so in tune with my body, and pinpoint what's happening. And my connection now between my heart, my body, and my mind is so strong that my body is now my greatest asset. And I'm able to, like, I just did this yesterday. I was dealing with some stuff, and I was like sitting in the orthodontist office with my daughter while she was getting her braces fixed. And I mean, it's busy and it's loud, and I was around all these people, but I was really upset and I couldn't understand why. I was able to like close my eyes and take a few deep breaths and travel my imagination down into the place in my body where I was feeling the tension and the pain. And it was my heart space, and it was the bottom of my chest and kind of the pit of my stomach, kind of all right there. And I was asked, I'm like, what is it you need, and what are you struggling with? And I received an answer. And then I had to process, like, okay, what is that answer? Like, I was a lot of work, but I was able to do it in such a in the chaos around me, and
Yes.
still be so keyed into what was happening in my body. And the healing that brings for me is amazing. And I do credit my meditation practice, and then my desire to want to face it and to be able to sit with my ickiness.
I love
Um,
that. So how has this led? So tell us quickly, like what you do now and how we can find you.
hmm. Now I coach, and I'm about to launch a program to help women get in tune with their body. And mostly it's about story changing so that they can express
Mm,
themselves on the inside, figure out what their truth is. I'm like not here to change anyone's mind or tell them what they should think or what religion they should belong to or anything like that. Like I'm good with people finding their own truth and being okay with that. And I love the diversity of truth. Um, so it's like about helping women who want to stop outsourcing, who want to stop seeking external validation and approval, and even like I don't know if guidance is the right word. It's more like, because I love guidance, but it's more like, can you look at all this guidance and then still decide what is for you?
for yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
And then I think what makes me unique is I really love helping women express on the outside their truth, because a lot of people get to the point where they know how they feel inside, but they like still kind of bottle it, and they're too afraid to like style themselves the way they want to, or dress the way they want to, or do what they want to. Like they're too afraid to go take that class, or they're too afraid to start a new hobby. The excuses are endless. My kids need me, and my husband doesn't want me gone. It's too busy. I did like whatever the excuse is, right? To
Yeah,
hold
like
up.
physical manifestation of how you feel on the
Yes.
inside is like
Yeah.
essential. I love
Yeah.
that. So
Joy.
can you tell us your website?
Yeah. It's marenswenson.com. And then you can find me on Instagram at Find Wild Serenity, and on
Awesome.
Facebook, and that's where I'm active.
And your podcast.
And my podcast, yes, called Wild Serenity, Finding Inner Peace Your Way. I love
Wonderful. Thank
so.
you so much. This has been amazing.
Yeah, thank you. This has been wonderful.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you. I have just loved talking to you.
Ditto.
Love you so much. Bye.